Thor and the Jotun Rungnir. One day, Odin was racing Sleipnir, his eight-legged steed, through the air. The Jotun Rungnir saw him. He too had a very swift horse that could run through the air. It was a beautiful horse with a golden mane, and Rungnir was very proud of it. "I bet my horse is faster than yours," he called up to Odin. Odin did not even bother to answer, and that made Rungnir so angry that he jumped upon his horse and sped after Odin to show him. They raced through the air like storm clouds with Odin ahead, but Rungnir close behind. The Jotun was so busy spurring his horse that he didn't see that Asgard was straight ahead, and before he knew it, he had stormed through the gate. He stopped short in the courtyard of Asgard, and that was not a safe place for a Jotun to be. Fortunately for Rungnir, Thor was not at home, and Odin, who always observed the laws of hospitality, could not turn a distant traveler away, so he asked Rungnir to come in and refresh himself with some mead the Aesir offered him. Thor's huge drinking horn filled with sweet mead and politely tried to make him feel at ease. To begin with, the Jotun minded his manners well, but he had barely emptied the drinking horn before he yelled for Freya to come and fill it again. Then he started to brawl and boast. He would pick up Valhalla and take it with him to Jotunheim, he bellowed, and then he would throw Asgard into the sea, so that all the Aesir would drown. He would spare only Freya and Sif, because he wanted them for wives. That was too much to take from a Jotun, and the Aesir called for Thor. At once he was standing in the doorway, twirling his hammer. The mere sight of him made Rungnir sober. "I was a fool to enter Asgard without my club," he shouted as he leapt to his feet. "But your father himself invited me, and it would be dishonorable, Thor, for you to kill an unarmed guest. Meet me tomorrow, and we can fight it out then. I will be waiting for you under the glacier next to my land if you dare to meet me there." "Get out of Asgard and be quick about it," Thor growled. "I will deal with you tomorrow." Excuse me. Rungnir rode home and called his neighbors together. After bragging loudly about having terrified the Aesir, he said that in the morning he would meet Thor in combat, and that he needed a second. The Jotuns put their heads together. If they could only get rid of Thor, they might overrun Asgard. Nobody felt strong enough to be Rungnir's second, however. So they decided to build a monstrous giant out of clay and set him up behind Rungnir as his helper. They worked the whole night, and when, at last, the clay man was finished, they brought him to life by putting the heart of a mare in his chest. No other creature's heart was big enough to keep the giant alive. Before dawn, Rungnir took his place at the foot of the glacier, with the clay giant looming behind him. At sunrise, Thor and Jalfi, his servant, arrived. Jalfi, fastest of all runners, ran ahead of Thor and shouted, "Rungnir, don't hold your shield up high, or Thor might strike you from beneath." When Rungnir heard that, he threw his shield to the ground and stood on it, clutching his club of whetstone in both hands. As Thor approached, with a rumble and a roar, the Jotun bravely stood his ground, but the clay giant trembled, and rivers of cold sweat ran down his sides, and although the mare's heart in his chest was big, it held no courage. Thor hurled his hammer, just as Rungnir lifted both arms and threw the whetstone. The two weapons met in midair with an ear-splitting crash. Splinters of whetstone flew to all sides, and from them have come all the whetstone mountains in the world. But one splinter went into Thor's head, and he fell to the ground. His hammer kept flying through the air, hit Rungnir's flint head, and smashed it to bits. As the Jotun crashed to the ground, one of his feet fell across Thor's neck. No matter how Thor struggled, he could not get free. There he lay, pinned under the fallen Rungnir. Jalfi, meanwhile, easily brought down the frightened clay giant. He simply dug under one of his legs, and the giant fell on his face. All that was left of him were clumps of boulders and clay. Jalfi then ran to the aid of Thor, but he could not pull him free, so he raced back to Asgard for help. But when Odin and the other Aesir came, none of them was able to lift the Jotun's foot off Thor's neck. Just then, Thor's little son Magni, who could not run very fast because his legs were so short, arrived. He was only 3 years old, but he was already amazingly strong, and he lifted Rungnir's foot with one hand. Thor was so proud of his son, he gave him Rungnir's golden-maned horse. When Thor came back to Asgard, he tried in vain to have the splinter of whetstone removed from his hand. But there it was, stuck and would not move. From then on, whenever somebody careless threw a whetstone across the floor, the splinter moved, and Thor, the thunder god, had a splitting headache. Then thunder roared and lightning flashed, for Thor, like most men, was not one for suffering in silence.